What retail media investments mean for restaurants, why lists make Uber a two-way experience, and how is AI reshaping the food supply chain? That's all ahead on this week's Digital Restaurant.
The digital restaurant works like this. We're going to ask each other 5 questions about headlines that affect the worlds of restaurants, off-premise, and technology, but in some way tie back to our book series, Delivering the Digital Restaurant. Are you ready? Let's go.
Happy Monday, Meredith. How are you doing today?
So good, Carl. How are you?
I'm good. I'm in the other side of the country. I'm in upstate New York. I've never been here before. How do you say this word? Adirondacks? Is that right? The Adirondack mountain range?
Oh boy, we're gonna have to work on that one later on off the podcast.
Fair enough. This week we've got a bit of a retail theme. Let's bring up the first question here because you've got a claim suggesting that DoorDash and Toast are quietly becoming Shopify. What does this mean?
Yeah, indeed. A pair of announcements from both DoorDash and Toast are super interesting. And frankly, to us, not that surprising because we talk about it in chapter 8 of Delivering the Digital Restaurant that these companies are really trying to build a full solution so that restaurants can have something that does the ordering, does the production, does online, does in store, does the consumer relations, does everything, right? All the way through to delivery. And I think both these companies are making steps toward that with this pair of announcements. The reason I picked Shopify as a point of comparison is because they're a more mature company outside of the restaurant space. So they've been at this for longer, doing all these types of things for retail. And a lot of what DoorDash and Toast are describing are things that Shopify does. So as they become that go-to tech solution for restaurants, let's hear what they're up to. In retail touchpoints, DoorDash announced the white label app that restaurants can just adapt to their own needs. But they also announced that they have tools for both online and in store. That one's pretty interesting. What is that in store all about? Of course, they had purchased POS company Bebot several years ago, so one wonders if that's related. They have created a business manager app so that those owners and GMs can see what's going on in the restaurant. Meanwhile, in Restaurant Business Online, Toast announced that they too have released a white label app and paired it together with a text messaging tool so that restaurants can advertise to their customers.
That's pretty interesting. Do you think this may broaden out? Do you think Shopify should be in any way concerned that DoorDash and Toast are coming after them?
I don't think Toast will. I think they're very focused on restaurants and going upmarket in restaurants, going internationally in restaurants. But DoorDash, of course, aspires to be the local merchant solution. And merchant could mean a lot of things aside from just restaurant. Of course, they've famously now gone into grocery, they've gone into C-store. What else might they go into? Instacart, likewise, is wrapping around its brick and mortar clients. So tell us what they're up to, Carl.
Yeah, I think I might have mentioned this to you last week. I was at grocery shop in Vegas, and the term that I saw coming up again and again was about retail media. And it intrigued me a little bit. And so I've kept my eye out for this one. And of course, as you say, Instacart has been a little bit in the news on this. And I'll explain as to how this retail media thing kicks in with it, because there was a particular press release around Thrive Market, which is a kind of healthy, good for you kind of grocery store. And they've launched a new retail media network, which is powered by Instacart's ad technology. And it's aimed at enhancing how brands connect with shoppers through personalized and data-driven advertising. I guess it's a concept relevant to restaurants because of the digital strategies that we always talk about here on the podcast, because it just offers new ways perhaps to engage with customers and optimize marketing. They're working with this thing called Carrot Ads, which extends the Instacart ad technology and their sales capabilities to support retail partners like Thrive in building and growing their own retail media networks on their owned websites and apps. This is what started triggering for me, Meredith, because I got a history as a retailer, and I was thinking about the amount of money the Coca-Colas and the Heinekens and the Pepsis and the Frito-Lays would have offered up to be able to have great placement in one of our stores, whether that be a location on a shelf or whether it be about a particular promotion. They would seek out certain retailers to be able to do that with, and then also offer up incentives to do that. In a way, what we're talking about now is not physical shop shelf space, but actually digital shop shelf space. And I guess the question for me is, if that's happening in this way, at least in the grocery sector, couldn't this also happen in a restaurant setting? For example, if you're on a McDonald's website, for example, is there someone like a Tyson Foods that I believe supplies McDonald's chicken nuggets, for example, going to be interested in perhaps supporting the further sale of nuggets to customers? Are they going to be able to try and put money behind that in a way to try and push certain items? I don't know. The other way of thinking about this is also then about the brands that also want to have representation on the McDonald's website. So things that perhaps aren't connected to the actual menu itself, but actually see themselves as a very similar type of representation to the McDonald's customer. Now, do we want our websites and our apps associated to restaurants being plagued with advertising? I don't know. But it does make me wonder as to whether there's some opportunities here for us to turn our digital assets into an opportunity as a revenue stream of sorts. Now, the other thing I wanted to touch on this week was that Instacart have been working, and this perhaps isn't too much of a surprise because Amazon Fresh have been doing this for a while, but they've been working with these special kind of carts. The carts are basically ones with a little tablet in the front of them. And I'll bring them up here, Meredith, so you can have a little look at what's on the actual screen here because it's interesting for me. First of all, they're promoting certain items, certain promotions where a customer is inside the store. And then in another way, they're also representing certain coupons that can be triggered. And these triggered coupons are coming up in a form of local beacon triggering to try and prompt the customer. Now, again, if you bring that back to the idea of can you create an environment here whereby you're actually getting a type of experience which is personalized to the customer. So they're only getting the promotions that might be interesting to them or items that perhaps they've purchased before. You can see that why that may work in a grocery setting. And I can hear you saying, Carl, this is all very interesting, but this is called the digital restaurant. But I guess from me, I'm thinking there are companies out there like Ziosk where they're having these digital assets on a table. Could we see a rise in experiential dining of gamifying and being able to treat a casual dining environment an opportunity perhaps to use the Zios of this world or a tablet? Maybe this brings back tablets onto our menus, or maybe it is just the customer's phone, but ways to create different levels of engagement and personalization. And if you can do that and then also bring back that concept of what I mentioned before about personalized ads from brands that want to connect to, I don't know, a Wendy's customer, for example, why wouldn't that be something that would be interesting? So anyway, interesting ideas of how we look. We often do, don't we? Look at ideas in different verticals, different countries, and the Instacart news this week triggered that one for me.
Hi, Carl here. Just to interrupt the show briefly to remind you that if you have yet to get your copy of either of the Delivering the Digital Restaurant books, now is the time to get one. If you head to thedigital.restaurant, you're going to be able to get the best price available. You can also listen to both books with yours truly talking about them on Audible. You can get a copy off Amazon if you'd prefer to order through them. But if you haven't got the books yet, get them. They really are going to transform the way in which you look at the restaurant industry and the way in which technology is disrupting it.
Okay, third question up this week. Oh, wow, you've got the AI question. My goodness. Tell us, supply chain AI supporting Wendy's, and I believe Chipotle's fund has actually got investing in this space as well, but perhaps in an area we weren't expecting.
Yeah, that's right. Don't worry, Carl. I will let you weigh in on this because I know you love yourself some AI. But it's happening in restaurants. And I think we've long been calling for a shift from the digital front of house, I'll call it, and online ordering, where a lot of money has gone in the last 5 years, to much more of the back of house and efficiencies and figuring out how to take cost out of the system. And this pair of articles about Wendy's use of AI and then the Cultivate Next Fund or Chipotle's corporate venture capital investing in AI are pretty interesting. Both of them supply chain related. So, first on LumaChain, this is an Australian company, and they use computer vision to track what is going on throughout the supply chain, all the way back into plants as well as preparation. And so they can use that computer vision to track behavioral data and see where maybe behaviors need correcting. They combine that with the use of blockchain and some other things so that they can get traceability all the way through the supply chain, which of course has not really been possible so far. I think they say on their website that true sustainability is not possible without traceability. And I agree with that, right? Even if a company comes out and says, we don't use beef from the Amazon rainforest, as an example, can they know that? Beef is a commodity. Where are they buying their 50s from? It's hard to say, right? And being able to trace all the way through makes that very clear and very obvious. So, congratulations to them on their raise. And then Wendy's using supply chain AI to help get more specific on their forecasting. So this was the Wendy's Quality Supply Chain Co-op partnering together with Palantir to bring disparate data sources together and help do better forecasting and all of the things that AI can do. Now, I just want to stop here and give a shout out to Teddy Bourgeois from the Yum RSCS, a restaurant supply chain. And he and I worked together many years ago at Taco Bell, and he was extremely good at this. And I will not tell you what the number was, but the obsolescence budget at Taco Bell, at a $10 billion brand, that means they're using over $3 billion of food every year through the supply chain. The obsolescence budget was a tiny minuscule fraction of that $3 billion. Like, you wouldn't even notice it. And he was just one human doing all that work. If AI can do it better, more power to it. I'm very excited to see what it does. But this is a problem in restaurants, and it's something that historically humans have taken on.
This is fascinating for me. As you said, I have got opinions. Luma chain, that idea of being able to monitor, in that case, meat processing plants and the deviation of process. This takes me back to when you and I were together at Kitchen United and said, Carl, you're not going to be able to have hundreds of people running this business. You've got to use tech. And I remember us utilizing video technology in that way, just at that time, to see whether, I don't know, mop floors were being mopped and things like that. It really strikes me as an opportunity, perhaps, to address quality deviations, abilities for us to be able to address accuracy issues, which we know is a huge issue when it comes to drive-throughs, but it's definitely one from a delivery standpoint as well. So to see this also being taken back into the supply chain and then also being perhaps used as a means to create an even better experience for guests to be able to say, I know the sourcing of my food. And then don't forget the food safety aspect of it as well, in terms of recalls, all of that. The piece that I think I'm really intrigued about is how they then tie those deviations, which are often driven by humans, into customized training programs actually delivered in the language of the person that made the error, which is something which I think is particularly pertinent in that particular environment. So yeah, really interesting stuff.
All right, question for you. It sounds like Uber has finally released a lists feature. Tell us about what that is.
It wasn't that long ago on the podcast, we talked about a startup that had this idea of creating lists and getting various different Instagram influencers to be able to talk about the right restaurants or the best restaurants to visit in a particular city. And now Uber are doing exactly that. The opportunity for us to create a list of our favorite restaurants in Orange County, Meredith. Well, we'll be able to share them with each other now. And then for those folks that have got tens of thousands of followers on their various social media platforms, they also are going to be able to do it. I suspect where we are in California, you're going to see The Rock coming out with his Uber favorite restaurants in LA and things like that, which is cool, right? I like that level of engagement. When you think about just the nature of our relationship with marketplaces, it is quite, I don't know, one way. It's a relationship by which they say, they give us the carousels, right? They say, these are the places you've ordered before from, and these are things that might be interesting to you, and these are the restaurants that are available on the platform. And so therefore, the smaller restaurants, or the restaurants that perhaps aren't advertising as much, don't always get called out. But I know that a recommendation from you, Meredith, and from our friends is going to count for more than perhaps a recommendation from a marketplace that thinks it knows us. And it does a pretty good job. So for me, this idea of us being able to engage with our food delivery apps is actually a far more collaborative, almost community oriented approach that actually just makes it feel a bit more fun as well. So yeah, it's not a novel idea, this. It has been done before. There are others out there doing it. But the fact that Uber is empowering its users to be able to do this, I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I think it is fun. Can you clarify, is it just for delivery restaurants, or is it for any restaurant so that they're driving rides too? Because people might take an Uber to go to a restaurant.
Well, that's a really good question. I don't know. I'll bring up this here. This is the GIF that they were putting out on the news article. So you can see that this one here, I think, is on a particular influencer talking about different items and the way in which each of those items have, particular restaurants and particular items in that restaurant. So it didn't really emphasize whether it is just for restaurants that are on the platform. But I think you're onto something there, that actually it would make a lot of sense for them to think about this as well from the standpoint of the logistics aspect, because again, Uber is uniquely positioned to do that. Last up this week, this is nice. What a way to finish with a bullish story about why we should be continuing to be excited about restaurant delivery. There's been plenty of reasons why people suggest perhaps it isn't something to be excited about, but Joe Koskowski, I think, has written an article about, let's stay positive. What do you
That's
think?
right. It wouldn't be the Digital Restaurant Podcast without a shout out to Joe Koskowski. I think we talk about him every other week. He is always tracking the interesting stuff. And what really got me in this article was that he said delivery jumped 15% at QSR in Q3 compared to declining traffic overall. So even as traffic continues to be slower, you're seeing it grow as it relates to delivery. That's super interesting. And why might that be? I have my hypothesis. I think it's because these guys are turning into advertising platforms and they've got all the restaurants spending a bunch of money on their own P&Ls to drive discounts and delivery. Consumers respond to those discounts, especially if they perceive that they're getting more of a discount in delivery than they get when they actually go pick it up themselves. But beyond this, Joe Goskowski suggests that there's lots of things coming that are going to make delivery companies even better off. And I'm gonna differentiate not just delivery or consumers using delivery or even restaurants who are offering delivery. I'm gonna say delivery companies specifically. And he highlights a couple things. The first is automation. Uber has come out with partnerships with Waymo, Nuro, Serve, Coco. I think we've been talking about those the last few weeks on the podcast here. And then Grubhub has a relationship with Starship, also sidewalk robots, but they're doing that primarily on university campuses. So he thinks that automation has the potential to bring costs down of delivery. Again, I think that would benefit the delivery companies because they're the ones right now eating it by paying all the drivers. I think it's very unlikely that they will pass those savings on to the consumer or the restaurants. The next thing that he talks about is the opportunity to grow their take rate via the new ads business. And he cites here specifically what's going on in the city of New York, where they had capped the fees that these marketplaces were allowed to charge. There's a new bill that, if it passes, will let marketplaces charge more for specifically the marketing service. So they will be able to grow their ads business overall. He also cites consolidation as another potential thing to happen here. He says there's some rumors out there of Uber acquiring Instacart. I am sure there is some other consolidation that could happen. Usually what we see in these marketplaces is that you end up with no more than 2 per geography. And we currently have 3. And then also, of course, the big one, Amazon, hanging out there, lurking around, owning a piece of Grubhub.
It really is an interesting time, isn't it? Because many folks would probably still say, I find delivery really challenging. It's a difficult thing for me to get my business thought around. But I'm excited to hear that Joe is still bullish. I think there are plenty of reasons to be. And again, because the consumers are still engaged in it at a time when value is so critical, it just shows you how much potential there is when perhaps value isn't necessarily going to be the front of mind thing for them.
Yeah, if DoorDash and Uber Eats have proven anything, they have proven that consumers love convenience and that they will order delivery, and that's something that consumers value. Now, how many consumers value it and can actually afford it is probably a different question. There's probably a lot of consumers out there who don't use it unless there's a significant discount being offered, but they have definitely proven that it is something that consumers want.
All right, there you are. You've heard it here first. That's what consumers want. That's what Meredith says. I agree, Meredith. Maybe it will be even more popular with these lists. In fact, we want to hear from you. What lists are you going to have? What are your top restaurants that you're going to put on the Uber Eats platform on your list? Let us know in the comments below. And let us know your thoughts around what AI and retail in particular, of what we're seeing in other verticals, is perhaps helping the restaurant industry to think about in terms of opportunities. But until next time, when I think I might be in Japan when I speak to you next. So my goodness, am I going to have some interesting ideas to share? But Meredith, I'm sure you'll be local. So we'll try and keep this onto a normal time zone. But until next time, everyone, thanks for listening and we'll see you then.
The Digital Restaurant Podcast is available for you to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Watch us rate us, and subscribe to The Digital Restaurant on YouTube, and follow along on all our social media digital restaurant channels. Thanks for listening.